Hello, welcome to Guns and Yellow Ribbons. I'm Fergus, I'm your host. This is Trevor, old man Trev as we like to call him. It's his 1 to 11. I'm joined obviously by Trevor, but I'm also joined by Potsy as we seem to do these in tandem. Hope you're well. And let's speak to the man of the moment. Trevor, how are you?
Hello, boys. I'm good. I'm excited about this. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and we've been saying we're going to do it, and now we're going. I've been thinking all morning. I've got my list of names. I've got, and I'm excited, boys. Yeah, excited to start. Let's get going.
I suppose the first thing to look at is like you've been going to the football since December. What was it? December the 5th, 1970 was your first game, wasn't it?
It was indeed, my friend. It was December 1970. My Uncle Pat, good old Uncle Pat, God bless his soul, he took me to watch the Arsenal v Wolves. We had unreserved seats in the West Stand lower. Still got the ticket, still got the programme. Arsenal 1-2. And then never looked back, mate. All my family were Tottenham fans, you know. Most of me direct family, my dad and my mum were Tottenham fans, but my Uncle Pat took me to the Arsenal, and that was it. I was set for life, boys. Set for life.
So I'm expecting some different players than what some of the others have done because of the generations of players you will have seen over the time. Have you got a formation?
Yeah, you'll have to forgive me, Fergus, because you're exactly right, mate. My list of players is obviously a bit longer than other people because I've been around a bit longer. It's that simple. Yeah, I'm gonna go 4-4-2, Fergus. I'm gonna go 4-4-2 eventually. Hopefully, I might change my mind yet halfway through, but at this moment, I'm going 4-4-2, mate.
Okay. So let's start with your keeper. And Potsy, if you've got any questions about any of these players anywhere along the way, just jump in and just.
I will have, mate. I'll definitely have some questions.
Let's make you squirm a little. So let's start with your keeper then.
Right. Okay. Well, the first goalkeeper I remember, boys, was Bob Wilson. Bob Wilson was the Arsenal goalkeeper when I first started watching them, and the understudy at the time was a lad called Jeff Barnett, who was another cracking goalkeeper. He was understudy of Bob Wilson, and actually Bob Wilson got injured, so Barnett played in the '72 Cup final when we lost to Leeds United 1-0. So yeah, Wilson's my first memory. Then of course you've got Jennings, and then you had a lad called Jimmy Rimmer. We signed him from Man United. Then Pat Jennings, we got him from Spurs. The only player I know that was actually signed from Spurs, played for North London clubs, and is really still a hero in both camps. I can't think of any others. And then we get like to Lukic in '89, and then we move on to the more recent ones, Lehman, Seaman, and then I've got to give Leno a mention as well. So they're the goalkeepers that come to mind, past and present, mate, to be honest.
You don't have Szczesny in there?
No, I don't have Szczesny in there. No, not at all. I think that Wenger's record of signing keepers was poor at one stage. We had a string, didn't we, of Almunia, what's his name, Manoni, Fabianski, Szczesny, and if I'm honest, I didn't really rate any of them, mate. You know, so yeah, I missed. There's a gap there for me till we got to Leno. Yeah.
So who is your number one? Who is your goalkeeper?
Right. Okay. Me and Dan had this conversation a little while ago about my heart and my head. Right. My heart said Wilson, right, because Bob Wilson was the bravest goalkeeper that's ever been on this planet, and a lovely man. I've met him, a lovely man, Bob Wilson. But I had to put down as my goalkeeper David Seaman because I think he's about the best I've seen. So Seaman is my number one. But if he gets injured, Willow's in.
Trev, if you had to kind of pick compare David Seaman and Bob Wilson, why does David Seaman get the nod ahead of Bob Wilson? What was it about David Seaman that was just that little bit better?
Well, you see, it's interesting you say that, Dan, and they're difficult questions to answer. They're questions that you can never answer properly because you can't compare eras, you know, because like we were talking about last night, weren't we, on the podcast, that football changes, so different styles of play are necessary in each area, you know. Bob Wilson was brave. He was renowned for coming out and diving at people's feet. And his one save he's remembered for when he nicked the ball off of George Best's toe, right, during a game. And it was brilliant. And he'd stand up with a ball and away we'd go. But a lot of these days, you see, if Bob Wilson had come out and dived at a player's feet like that every week, the player would have gone down. Slightest touch, players down, penalty, innit, you know? So Seaman was a bit more of an all-round keeper for me, and just that bit more commanding. Big fella, read the game well, and it was so close. But I've just got to go with Seaman. Just nicks it for me, Dan.
And you said you're going for a 4-4-2 formation. Is that what you said?
Yeah. At the moment, yeah.
Okay, so let's do your left back then.
My left back, right? Okay, the left backs that come to mind were when I first started watching the Arsenal. We had a lad called Bob McNabb. He was a competent left back, not the best I've ever seen, but one of my first memories at Arsenal. And then we had Super Sammy Nelson, right? Sammy Nelson was a star. He used to drop his shorts in front of the North Bank. Still goes to the Arsenal now. I saw a mate of mine, Colin Bates from the Arsenal. He put a picture on the other day. I think it was for the West Ham game. He was going to the game, stood on the tube. Who's he stood next to? Sammy Nelson. Sammy Nelson's going to the Arsenal on the tube. So Nelson was a top man. Then you've got, of course, Kenny Sansom, who got a lot of caps for England. Kenny Sansom. Very good player. It's a shame to see that he went off the rails after his career ended, because he was a very, very good player. And an interesting point about Kenny Sansom, we signed, what's his name, Clive Allen as a striker, you know, at Arsenal, and he never played a competitive. I don't think he didn't play a competitive game for Arsenal. He played a friendly. And then before he could play, we got rid of Clive Allen to Crystal Palace, I think it was, and Sansom came in the other direction as the left back. And I think we got a good deal with Kenny Sansom. Very, very good left back. A lot of caps for England. Then, of course, when Sansom went, we got another brilliant left back, Nigel Winterburn. You know, he came in, took Sansom's place. Winterburn, another brilliant player. We weren't short of left backs, were we? Because then along comes Ashley Cole. Not going to talk about him for too long, because I don't talk badly about Arsenal players, but he came and went on his way. And then, of course, Nacho Monreal. He's not let us down, has he? And a utility player as well. He's never let us down when he's gone to centre half. And I'm also, one last one I'm going to mention, right, is the young lad Saka. He's not a left back, is he, right? But if you talk about left backs and you think about the current time, he is our current left back, right? And for a young lad, 17, 18 years old, who'd never played there before, to develop in that position in such a short space of time into a competent player who can get forward and score goals, worth a mention in my book, boys. So, yeah, that's about all my left backs. Have I waffled too much there, boys? I'm sorry if I have.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, you have.
Oh,
but
right,
we're used to you. We're used to you. Who are you going for?
Left back.
It's going to take forever, you know that.
No, I wanted to go for Nigel Winterburn, right? But the best left back I've seen at Arsenal in recent years was that, I won't say the name again. I'll only say this once, so listen, right? Was Cole. Move on, right? So he's got to go in, because you're asking me my best, aren't you? Right?
Yeah. Right back.
Yeah. Right back. Oh my good golly. First right back I ever remember at Arsenal was the best, one of the greatest servants the club's ever had, wasn't it? Pat Rice, you know? What a man. Was he 71 last week? I think it was his birthday. Turned 71. Arsenal through and through, you know. His blood's red for a reason, you know, not because it's red blood, because it's Arsenal blood, boys. So, yeah, there was Pat Rice, and then Lee Dixon came along, and we've had Lauren, and we've had Bellerin, and we had a bloke we signed from Forest. I don't know if you boys remember him, Viv Anderson, left us under a big cloud, went to Man United for the money, Viv Anderson. We played the season he went to Man United. We played him early in the season, you know, at Old Trafford. I can't remember what year it was, boys. It would have been mid to late 80s. And I went to the game at Old Trafford, and by God, did Anderson get some stick off the Arsenal fans that night. It's the first time I can ever remember a player really, really getting stick. And we drew 0-0. So at Man United, that was a big night. And then, of course, you can't leave Lauren out and Sanya out. They're all, they're all good lads. But I think my favourite of the lot is Dixon. I'd put Dixon in my side. My heart would say Pat Rice. My head would say Lee Dixon.
I am noting down your heart and your head.
All right, I'm trying to move it along now because you boys are nagging me already, and we're not.
That's good, Trev. It's good. I like it. I like it. We're only missing. I like the fact you get the old players in as well. The only question I've got about right back, Trev, is the fact that Lauren gets kind of overlooked quite a lot by people I speak to. Now, I was with you. I picked Lee Dixon as well, and the reason I went for Dixon was just purely for the fact that he was part of that fantastic back four or back five, if you include Seaman, under George Graham. And I think that for consistency, Lee Dixon was just fantastic. Why did you think go for Lee Dixon over Rice and Lauren?
I think that I mentioned Lauren. But for me, he didn't get in my top two. I thought he was a class player, and he could easily put him inside, obviously, mate, But my team, old man Trev's team, I had to choose between Pat Rice and Lee Dixon, and I went for Dixon just because of his longevity, really, and that back, as you just said, rightly said, Dan, that you'll never see another back five like we had.
No,
you'll never see another back five in the game. It will never happen. They will never ever string a defence together. 4 class players all in the same side at the same time in the same era like that with Seaman behind them. That'll never happen again, I don't think.
And who are you going for your centre-back pairings?
Well, the centre-halves that come to mind, right, it's quite a long list, right? You've got my first memories of Frank McClintock, who lifted the double in 1971. So he'll always be really close to my heart, a lovely man, Frank McClintock. And in that same time was a very much underrated centre half we had playing alongside Frank McClintock, Peter Simpson. I don't know if you've heard the name Peter Simpson, boys. Very, very underrated centre half, double winning player, and very much worth a mention. Then you start getting to the more. I started thinking about some jovial ones. I mean, you got Big Willie Young, who we signed from Tottenham, right? Brilliant. One week, the Arsenal fans, me included, we were hating Willie Young. He's a Tottenham player. He's a big red-headed Scots lad, and we hate him with a vengeance. We signed him at Arsenal, and overnight, the coin flipped straight over. He's our hero. He's our brilliant player, and Tottenham fans hate him, But he was a character, was Willie Young. He was a hard man, and all he could put a tackle in. I don't know if he'd last long nowadays. And then I thought about a bloke we signed called Terry Mancini, right? He plays. Have you ever heard of Terry Mancini, boys?
Yeah.
We signed him from Queen's Park Rangers. The only reason I remember him is because he had hair like me, and there's not many players that have been that bald, man. But Mancini did a little job. We only signed him as a stopgap at the end of a season, and he did all right, Mancini.
Who are you going for then?
No, I'm not finished yet, mate. You want my team, you're going to get my team. Don't mess with the old man today, right? And then you've got, obviously, Sol Campbell, who we signed from Tottenham. Probably the second best centre-half I've seen at Arsenal. Martin Keown's worth a mention because I love the way he played the game, and I love the way he got in Van Nistelrooy's face. He's worth a mention just for that, right? And then you got Baldy, O'Leary, record player for Arsenal, O'Leary. And then you got to mention Kolo Toure as well, right? Because Kolo Toure is a raving lunatic, He is. When he first came to Arsenal, right, as a young lad, it didn't matter where Wenger played him. He just ran around the park like an headless chicken. Kolo Toure. It was a pleasure. But the best one, straight in, didn't even have to think about it. Adams is in my side, right? Tony Adams is in my heart side and he's in my head side. He's by far the greatest player I've ever seen at Arsenal. Bar none.
So Adams and...
Yeah. Well, alongside Adams, my heart would go for McClintock, right? But my head, looking at a class player, would be Campbell, would be big Sol Campbell. So, yeah, Adams and Campbell is me head side, my best side.
And
Very
moving up into
very
the
quickly.
midfield.
Sorry, Ferg. Very quickly. I know you want to move on. Very quickly about the Kolo Toure thing. Best story, and it is quick, that I heard about him was the trial he had at Arsenal. And basically, the ball would come up in the air, and then Wenger said, "I like this player." And basically, he takes out, as the ball comes down, he 2-foots Dennis Bergkamp. So then Arsene Wenger's going, whoa, 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 whoa. He's one of our best players. You don't tackle him, mate. You don't go in like that hard against him. Calm down, calm down. Oh, sorry, boss, he says. Next ball comes up in the air and he wins it. Elbows Thierry Henry in the head and stamps on his knee as he comes down. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't injure these players. Don't injure them too. I don't care what you do. Don't injure them two players. Oh, sorry, boss, he says. Last ball comes up. Heads up towards the end, and Kolo Toure dives and takes out Arsene Wenger. So he takes out Arsene Wenger, Thierry Henry, and Dennis Bergkamp. Ray Parlour went up to him and said, "Blimey, he's a bit of a nightmare." And he goes, "He's an absolute nutter. I'm going to sign him tomorrow."
Yeah,
it's a great story. That is.
I believe that story. Having seen Kolo Toure, mate, you can't not believe it, can you? Raving lunatic when he come to Arsenal, but brilliant player. Yeah.
So moving into the midfield, Trev. Who have you got in the centre of your midfield? Your two players in the centre.
Well, I'm just going to go across the midfield, right? I'm just going to go. I'm going to name some names first, right? The names on my list, and I'll be brief because they're quite long. So I'll be brief, Fergus. Don't panic, my son. Jack Wilshere, because he scored probably one of the greatest goals at the Emirates I've seen. Well, he was on the end of one of the greatest goals I've ever seen against Norwich at the Emirates. I loved David Platt. I loved the way David Platt played the game. Paul Davis, because Paul Davis was a man amongst men at times. And he was the first player I've ever known that got found guilty by TV. ITV sent their pictures in and he got banned for 9 or 10 weeks for breaking Glenn Cockerill's jaw, which I know I shouldn't laugh, but I do. I'm sorry. John Hollins was a great old player in his day. John Hollins, we signed him from Chelsea when he was getting a bit older. Played all right for the Arsenal. Gilberto, nothing more to say really about Gilberto. He was a player and he did a job and he was a big lad and he played in a good Arsenal side. Then, we had a player called Brian Marwood who used to play wide for the Arsenal. George Graham signed Brian Marwood and he was a massive player for the Arsenal for a short time. But in them days of wingers, going back to the 80s, winger, I think, my opinion is that wingers used to get worked out pretty quickly. They'd have one or two good seasons. Then the opposition would look at them and think, right, that's how we can stop a winger. And they used to work them out. So as quick as they came, they went again, And then you've got George Graham, greatest manager. Shame it ended when it did. Shame it ended when it did because we were going places. I know people say his teams were starting to drop off as a manager, but they all teams go through these periods. What's his name? But Man United, Ferguson at Man United, he had ups and downs. He had to build 2 or 3 sides, and I think Graham would have done that. But he was a good player, George Graham. Tried to steal a goal in the 1971 FA Cup final off Eddie Gully, claimed it was his, and he was telling porky pies. And then the great, I'll leave him out for a minute. Then I love Cesc Fabregas was the best 17-year-old I've seen at the club probably up until I saw Saka recently. They're both in the same boat. Rocky Rocastle, how can you not put Rocky Rocastle down as a memory? Class act and a lovely fella. Mickey Thomas scored one of the most important goals ever scored by Arsenal. 89. Wow, what a player. Then you got Ray Parlour. Oh, it's only Ray Parlour. What a wonderful man Ray Parlour is, and what a wonderful goal he scored in that 2-0 win over Chelsea. Not many more, boys, don't worry. Freddie Ljungberg, because Freddie was one of these underrated players at the time, wasn't he? I don't think we appreciated Freddie Ljungberg till his career was over and we started looking back at how much we missed him, And then Chippy, Liam Brady scored. I can remember being at the game when we won 5-0 at Tottenham. What year was it we won 5-0 at Tottenham? 1978, I think. And Brady nicked the ball off of Peter Taylor's toe and curled it in the top corner. And oh, man, what a party that was. Then Pires comes to mind. I don't have to talk about Pires because everybody knows when you mention Pires, you're talking about class. Manu Petit. I thought Petit was one of the best signings we made. Shame we didn't keep him longer.
Great player.
Then you got we signed a bloke from Ipswich called Brian Talbot, you know, who was a very good player. Played in, I believe, off the top of my head, I've not checked this. He played in 2 consecutive cup finals for different teams. I think he played for Ipswich against us in '78 when they beat us, and he played for Arsenal against Man United in '79 when we beat them. Then I've just got a few more. Mark Overmars, who we all know about. Alan Ball, World Cup winner. We signed Alan Ball as a World Cup winner. Record signing he was at the time. Cost us £225,000, I think, and everyone was going mental about it. Why is that much being spent on a player? 225 grand. You wouldn't buy a little toe nowadays, would you?
You wouldn't get 4 days work out of Ozil for that.
No, you wouldn't. And then a bloke come to mind called Peter Story. You ever heard of Peter Story, boys?
Yeah, Peter Story, yeah.
Hard man, Peter Story. Every team in the 70s had to have their hard man, their tackler, and we had Peter Story. Oh, man, what an hard man. Wouldn't argue with him. Put a little mention in for Mikel Arteta. He'd never get in my side as a midfielder, but he's a manager now. And then the last one I've got on my list, apart from who's going on my team, is Santi Cazorla, right? Santi Cazorla was one of the unluckiest players ever to play for Arsenal. And I'll tell you why. Not because of his injury, but because he was an extremely good player in a poor Arsenal side, right? At the time. If he'd have played in any other Arsenal side, if he'd have been like 10 years earlier, he'd have still walked in that side, you know, Cazorla. Unbelievably class act.
Loved him.
Thought the world of the man. But you want me midfield, don't you, right? So
yeah,
I've got to go for Patrick Vieira, right? Because that's me head, me best side, Patrick Vieira. If I had to choose top 3 players playing at Arsenal, it'd probably be in there, Vieira, right? And then I'm going to put Petit in, because Petit and Vieira alongside each other, there was no beating them, right?
Mm.
And then I may shock a few people here, but on the left side of midfield, right, I'm going to put George Armstrong in. Now, I've not mentioned George yet, right? But he's one of the few players, I think, that would have gone from the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s to the present day, and he could still get in a side, right? Because he could roll. I've put him in the side in my head side, right? Before Perez. I rated George Armstrong that much. He really could play football. Play football. Magic. And then my last one in midfield, I'm going to play him just behind the forwards. I'm going to play Dennis Bergkamp, right? I'm going to play Dennis Bergkamp deeper, because I've got to squeeze Dennis Bergkamp in, and I can't play him up front. So, right, he's playing midfield.
I did the same thing, mate.
Yeah, he's playing me number 10.
Well, that's your head. What would you quickly run through the names in your heart?
My heart midfield was Armstrong again, right? Mickey Thomas, because it gave me a fantastic memory, Mickey Thomas, right? Patrick Vieira, because I've never seen a better midfielder, I don't think, in that context of midfield, you know, being hard and being able to play and bossing a game. And then I put Santi in, because I've got a right soft spot for Santi, because it's just a wonderful player. Yeah, so that's me midfield sorted, yeah.
So we're up to the forward line. Who have you got number 9?
Oh my Lord. This was so hard, right? Obviously, when you think about Arsenal forwards, you think about Henry first, right? Because all his goals were on telly again this morning, and you just look in your jaw, it's the floor at his skills. And then you've got Bergkamp, who's fantastic. Then you've got Wright, who's amazing. Then the people that gave me my early memories, Charlie George, right, who scored the winner in the 1971 FA Cup final. We're going to extra time 0-0. Liverpool scores. Steve Ioway scores to Liverpool in 1971. And in them days, you go 1-0 down to Liverpool, it's game over. You don't come back. You're done, you know? And then we equalise. Eddie Kelly scores. As I just said, George Graves tries to nick it, but we worked you out, George. We knew it weren't you, pal. It was Eddie Kelly scored. And then Charlie George picks the ball up on the edge of the area and smashes it in the back of the net. And a 9-year-old sitting on the sofa at home with his family goes ballistic. And that was me, you know. Brilliant. And then you got John Radford, who was the first centre forward I ever remember playing at Arsenal. John Radford scored loads and loads of goals for Arsenal. And then you've got Smudger, Alan Smith, who scored in 89. So you've got to mention Smithy. Charlie Nicholas, who we signed from Celtic, who never really fulfilled his potential at Arsenal. Good, not brilliant. Nicholas Anelka. Biggest mistake he ever made, that boy, was leaving Arsenal, because he was going to develop into, I mean, he was a brilliant player, we know it, but he was going to be the best of the best.
He even admitted that, didn't he? He even said that he should never have left Arsenal.
Yeah, he did. And he's got three brothers, and Dan, and they seem to have a big input into his career at times, I think.
His brother was the reason he left.
Yeah. So you've got Anelka, then Will Todd, who did a good job. And then another one that came to mind was Malcolm McDonald, Supermax. You remember Malcolm McDonald, boys?
Yeah, Malcolm McDonald from Newcastle,
Signed him from Newcastle. I've not checked this. I've got a funny feeling it was about 330,000 we played for Malcolm McDonald. He had the biggest bow legs, right, you've ever seen. He was like two boomerangs, right? He must have got nutmegged more time than ever because he couldn't close his legs. He had these big bow legs on him, Malcolm McDonald. And he did a great job for a few years, and then he got a bad injury, and he was never the same again, and he was gone. Then the present day, you've got to mention Lackett and Alba. Neither of them get in my side, but I think they're both competent strikers. I don't think either of them are great yet, but you've got to mention them. Giroud, you've got to mention him just for his spider goal, and I think yeah. And I think that Scorpion. Sorry, did I say sorry, boys? You know what I meant. But
what about Carnu? Carnu get a mention?
No,
no.
He's on my list. He's on my list.
Who's not on your list?
Did all right. Well, there's a lot not on my list, mate. When I tell you what, don't make me start going down my list of the dross we've signed over the years.
Okay.
That's massive. Alan Sunderland scored the winning goal in the 1979 FA Cup final. Now, at the time, this just goes to show how the era's changed, right? And as we get younger fans coming in, games that were brilliant sort of lose importance. At the time, the 1979 FA Cup final was the greatest cup final there has ever been for excitement, right? And for me, as an older person, it still ranks right up there, We're winning 2-0 with about 4 minutes to go. Yeah. And then it's 2-2. And we're thinking we're in big trouble here against Man United. And then up pops Alan Sunderland straight at the other end to knock the winner in. You don't get excitement like it. You don't get excitement like it. One of the greatest cup finals ever. Yeah. And then I'm going to mention Kevin Campbell, because he probably won't forgive me if I didn't. And he was a big fella. Kev, he came into the team, and he excited people because he was a big bull of a fella, and he put himself about, and he scored some great goals, and I enjoyed watching him. And the last two I'm going to mention, right, is a lad called, you two probably won't have heard of him, and he never made it really at Arsenal, but we signed in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, we signed a lad called Peter Marinello, and he was meant to be the new George Best, and he had the long hair, and he wore all the posh clothes, and he was always out and about on the town like George Best was. Only trouble was he couldn't really kick a ball, So, but I had to mention him because he was entertainment value. And then I'm just going to mention at the end another player, Jose Antonio Reyes. God bless him, brilliant player. Sad loss. So now you want me to choose my forwards, don't you?
Please.
Forwards, right. It's the same. It's the same in my heart team and my head team, right? I'm going to go for Terry Henry and Ian Wright. Right. Ian Wright. So many others I could have put in there and not felt guilty about it. Not felt guilty at all about it. But Henry and Wright for me, playing just in front of Bergkamp with George Armstrong on the wing feeding them. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Very happy with that, boys.
Last question. Your manager.
Oh, don't, right. The managers that I remember from my time at Arsenal, right, is Bertie Mee won the double. Old school, though. I mean, Bertie Mee was a physiotherapist, who became a manager. Don Howe, Terry Neal, Bruce Rioch, George Graham, Arsene Wenger, Unai Emery, and Mikel Arteta. Right, they're the managers I remember. And then the only one I can really you have to mention is Herbert Chapman, who made Arsenal the club they are. If you don't have Herbert Chapman doing these Wenger Graham things in equivalent in the 30s, you don't have an Arsenal. So Graham and Wenger, right? I tossed a coin because I couldn't decide, right? And it came down on George Graham.
For your head.
It came down on George Graham, and I'm sticking with that.
And that's your heart as well as your head?
I think if Wenger had, I don't want this to sound like I'm talking bad about Wenger, because you know me, boys. I have to reiterate every podcast. I never talk bad about an Arsenal person. I have opinions on them, but I'm never going to talk them down. I think if Wenger had retired in 2008, 2010, Wenger would have probably got it. Well, I know he would actually, but he didn't, right? So I'm looking at whole managerial careers, and I'm going for Graham.
Okay. I don't think we can argue with that, to be fair, Trev, because of who you've seen and the players you've seen. My only final question for you is just a one-word answer. Is your favourite ever Arsenal player in that team?
My favourite Arsenal player ever is in that team, yeah.
Who is it?
It's Tony Adams. Tony Adams.
Great shout.
So you've gone for a side of Seaman, Dixon, Adams, Campbell, and Cole as the back five. Armstrong, Vieira, Petit, and Bergkamp in the midfield. Thierry Henry and Ian Wright, managed by none only George Graham.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with that. I apologise to the 100 other players on my list that I've left off.
You gave him a mention, though, mate.
It's been sorry, boys. It's been wonderful the last couple of days thinking about it. You know, just giving it some thought, and I've only Googled two little bits and pieces. All that lot has come in. The more I've thought, the more names have come into my head. You know, and just makes me think. I've been honoured to see most of those 99.9% of those players play in that red shirt of Arsenal. It's been a pleasure watching all of them, and look, hopefully it will continue for a while yet. Yeah, pleasure. Unbelievable.
That's been good, Trev. Loved it, mate. Loved it.
It's been great, and I knew your 1 to 11 would be really, really good. And we've had to do lots of these sort of different bits and pieces to try and get us through this lockdown period. That's gone right around the UK. Well, most of Europe, I think, is locked down at the minute. So, yeah, thank you very much, Trev. Potsy, thanks again. Remember, you are watching an Arsenal podcast by Arsenal fans for Arsenal fans. If you like what we do, click on the bell, click on the like button if it's on YouTube. Or if you're listening to us on SoundCloud, Spotify, just subscribe to us as well, so you'll get updates every time we put a podcast out, which is quite a lot. Thanks very much. Up the Arsenal.